Welcome everybody. I'm Brandon Dawkins with Tribune Digital Media here with Scott Buttram, publisher of the Trussville Tribune. And as we will explain in each video, we are doing extensive, in-depth interviews with all the candidates for mayor of Trussville, and we are releasing them at the same time. They are unedited interviews where we get to have a conversation with the people who are running for this important position in an important time in our city.
And by unedited, from the time the camera starts rolling till the interview is completed, you'll hear and see everything. We will not cut anything out. You'll hear our complete questions. You'll hear the candidates' complete answers. We appreciate all three mayoral candidates in Trussville agreeing to this.
Yep.
They all know really everything's on the table. This is in depth, and they all agreed to do it. We appreciate that.
This does not take the place of forums that we will be doing with all the cities and all contested races that will come later in the summer.
Right, and we will probably have these guys back in pretty early in that cycle to do the forum. That's our plan, to do Trussville fairly early. But Trussville is going to have a major change. Anytime you have a mayor who's not running for re-election, you know you're going to have someone new in the mayor's office. It's a critical time for the community. We want our community, you, the audience, to know as much about every one of these candidates as we can possibly bring to you, and that's our goal today.
And so now, obviously, we're starting with Ben Short, who's on City Council. So welcome, Ben. We're going to go first name basis.
All right, no, that's perfect.
Okay.
Thanks for having me.
We all know each other, and we just appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Yeah, so, glad to be here.
Okay. All right, do you want to get started?
Well, yeah, I can start. And we're going to ask everyone this question. We had to rephrase it a little bit for J.T. Smallwood because he's not a city council person, as the other two candidates are. So the first thing I want to ask you, you've served a 5-year term, actually, instead of a 4-year term.
Yeah.
The state added a year. What are you most proud of? And I'm talking about from the complete administration, okay? Not necessarily something you personally did, but what are you most proud of from this administration in this current term?
Since this is a conversation, I'm probably going to say more than normal. So
okay.
I would say
I am too.
I would say that we've been able to acquire around $15 million of non-local funds to implement projects in the city that didn't come from our local pocket of money, didn't come from our general fund. So we're talking about the school board building, $5 million there. We're talking about the softball field at $4.2 million. We're talking about the pickleball fields, or the courts rather, sorry, not fields, pickleball courts, thanks to state grants. So all of that is done via relationships, and I think this administration has done a really good job of making sure that we have those relationships with our state and federal partners to get this money, to get non-local dollars into our community so we can focus and use our general fund on ensuring that our public safety, for instance, is staffed the way that it needs to be. So I think that's probably what I'm most proud of, is that Trussville continues to be a desirable place for state and federal partners to really take notice of and put dollars here. And so that's one answer for you.
Well, I want to follow up with that if I can.
Yeah,
just a couple of items. You mentioned the grant. The school board, they were planning to use some of their reserve funds to build the central office.
Correct.
And you're correct. A state grant became available that ended up taking care of that construction. But that was school board. Did the city play a role in that?
I think it's the school board and the city. There are separate entities for sure. So the short answer is no. But the fact that Trussville is a desirable place and the actions that this administration has done and taken to ensure that we are a safe place and we're a place that small businesses want to come to and start up really drive the interest here. And so I would like to think that this administration's actions kind of correlated and made that possible. So.
Okay.
It's probably fair to back up a little bit, just because we assume people know a lot about you because you're a city council person and you've run for office before. There are new people in Trussville that probably don't know your background.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell people about what
yeah,
you
sure.
Like you do have a career as a law enforcement officer and you've done a lot of different things. Tell people a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I started in the city in 2011. Well, started as an employee in the city of Trussville in 2011. Was hired as a police officer. I was a police officer here.
Well, let's back up a little.
You want to go? You want to go further? All right.
Where'd you grow up?
All right. So I guess I'm going to give everybody my life story here, and that's fine. So I was a military kid. My dad was in the United States Air Force, retired. My grandparents lived in I'm going to say Blount County, but Straight Mountain for those that know. And so my dad graduated from Appalachian High School, and when he retired from the United States military, he said, "Hey, I'm going to go back home, but it's not going to be Straight Mountain because my younger brother and I still had some high school left in us." And so he moved to Trussville, Alabama for the education. He didn't want me going to Appalachian. No offense to those that are there, but that's a K-12 school. Yeah. And I think he graduated, like the entire K-12 had like 100 kids. Right. So. And
it's all new now.
Yeah, it is, and there's more students there, and all of that.
It's kind of appealing at this point.
Yeah. And so, but at the time, he was like, "Hey, we're going to move to Trussville so you can finish high school." So I moved here in 2003, graduated in the first graduating class of the Trussville City School System, and then went to Pensacola, Florida for college. So I got my undergrad at the University of West Florida. So I have undergrad degrees in public relations and criminal justice. I have a master's degree and a PhD in forensic psychology. And so, and Trussville kind of paid for my master's and, well, had I stayed, hopefully a little bit of my PhD, but I left before I got that. And so got hired as a police officer in 2011, made detective in 2016, somewhere in there, when the Jefferson County Metro Area Crime Center became a thing. So Trussville loaned me out to the crime center, and so I worked inside of that intelligence unit working on crime across the Birmingham metro area to try to keep crime from coming to our city. So I did that for a while, and in 2020 I decided to run for city council, won the spot, and that made me leave. I had to leave by law my role with the Trussville Police Department. So. And I also interacted with the Tribune. I was the public information officer for the last couple of years during my time there as well. So started and founded the Trussville Facebook page, the Trussville Police Department Facebook page, and interacted with the media in that capacity using some of that public relations degree. But in 2020, won the seat, and then I got a job offer at the Jefferson County District Attorney's Office. So I went to work for Danny Carr, working for initially working for the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. It's a federal grant under the Department of Justice. So I did cold case sexual assault investigations and served as a resource for investigators across the state of Alabama for sexual assault. Finished my PhD while I was there studying domestic violence, the correlation of domestic violence and homicides in the Birmingham area. Finished that out and then moved into a domestic violence specialty. And so sexual assault, domestic violence is what I'm an expert in, as well as mobile and digital forensics. But I have stepped away from all of that. I still teach law enforcement, primarily technology-based issues in crime, but I stepped away to kind of focus on the campaign.
And when you were at Trussville PD, you did a lot of digital forensics?
I did, yes, yeah. So Trussville spent a lot of time and energy and resources in me to learn the digital forensics world. So cell phones, computers, mobile forensics. Went to some training at the National Computer Forensic Institute in Hoover. They sent me really all over the country studying and training to become an expert in digital forensics. So
you've also kind of become a local business person.
Right. So my wife and I, we started Trussville to Go in 2018. So I was actually working for the Trussville Police Department at the time. And so we started this company, and it is, for those that don't know what it is, it's like a localized version of DoorDash. So all of the local restaurants, we have partnerships with those, the majority of those. And so our staff will bring you food. You just order from the app or the website. So started that in 2018, and really that is where our philanthropy and outreach kind of originated. You start a restaurant delivery service in 2018, and then you have COVID that happens in 2020. Not that I'm wishing COVID upon anyone, but it was really, really good for the restaurant delivery service. And so Amanda and I benefited from that, benefited from the community's use of that company, and so we wanted to give back in a certain way. And so we started the Trussville to Go Scholarship. We support the foundation, the athletic foundation, and I don't know how many sports teams we sponsor and meals that we sponsor through the community, but all that's done through Trussville to Go. So started in 2018, convinced my wife, who was a marketing and public relations director for a nonprofit in Hoover. I said, hey, I have the insurance and benefits on mine. I really need you to quit your job and take this leap of faith with me. And it turned out to be a very good thing. And so 2018 for Trussville to Go. I also own a photography company that I established in 2008. I've got 4 women that kind of run under that brand and do an amazing job keeping things afloat there. And then I also do a lot of real estate investment. So I own some real estate, and I only own 1 commercial building here in Trussville off Deerfoot Parkway. I put that out there for everybody to know. That way there's no conflict, right? But we do have a real estate investment company, an arm, that we've kind of put the right people in place, and it's allowed me to take a step back from all of those companies and focus really on serving the community in this way.
And thank you for hiring drivers at Trussville to Go that don't make you nervous to open your front door.
Yeah.
Good people.
We interview them all.
They're good ones. Following up on our original question, where we asked, what are you most proud of this last administration, or the current administration, I should say? What is your biggest disappointment in the current administration? What item do you wish you'd have done differently?
That's a fair question. You know, in the moments, and I'll preface this with saying, look, the decision's been made, so moving forward, we're going to support these programs and the kids and the parents that are within these programs. But I think in the beginning there was a learning curve. You know, being a city employee for 10 years, you think you know. You think you have a good idea,
really?
But until you are having to make the decisions and you're in the day in and day out of it, you really don't know as much as you think. And so looking back, looking at the decisions, I think the only one that comes to mind would be the gymnastics facility. And again, I'm going to support the kids and the programs. We made the decision, we're going with it. But looking back, I made that decision and voted yes for it primarily due to what I thought it would do about bringing in hotels, and those haven't come to fruition at this time. So it was supposed to bring in 2 hotels, additional lodging taxes were supposed to come to the city, and that's where my mind was. And in the beginning, I didn't look at all the issues as holistically as I probably should have. Now I look at it from every possible angle. I've grown as a leader in this position. And looking back, I wouldn't have approved that because it directly competes with businesses that already exist in Trussville. And so that's really kind of where it's at. I didn't.
And it was expensive.
It was, and I didn't fully anticipate the impact on those small businesses at the time. But again, now we've made that decision. We have the facility. These programs need to be supported and continued, and I'm going to continue to do that.
And it is servicing 600 to 800.
More than that. Yeah, we're at a. I don't want to miss. It's 1,000 or right at 1,000, maybe more, and they do generate a good bit of revenue. And so I think in this past budget we allocated $1.5 million between cheer and gymnastics. That's on the expense side. Revenue, they're bringing in around $800,000 a year, so they're still operating at a loss. And again, Parks and Recreation isn't about. It's not supposed to make money, right? But the fact that these 2 entities directly compete with local businesses, we have to be very specific in how we approach it moving forward, because those arms need to be operated like small businesses. If we're going to be out there as a city deciding this is what we're going to do, we have to frame it to where we're not taking a loss on that. So that's something that needs to be worked on.
Some of the things that you thought that were going to come along with it, hotels and lodging tax, was that just a victim of economic times? Yeah,
and they still own the property. So we had 2 apartment developers, or really 1 apartment developer that was going to put 2 apartments on Service Road in close proximity to that. And I really thought Deerfoot Parkway would have started as well by now from a development standpoint, close to the interstate. And that's still going to happen, just we don't know when. But I think it was a victim of the times. The market kind of started to have quite a bit of uncertainty in it, and so it didn't come to fruition the way that I felt like it was going to. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just to kind of address Park and Rec, and you're right, I don't think we should be looking to make profit on city
we can't.
services, things like that. That shouldn't be our goal.
Nice if it breaks even, I guess.
Yeah, break even or as minimal loss as possible.
But it can stimulate additional economic growth within your city.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think Chris is working on the story right now, will be very soon, about the Alabama State Games coming.
Yep.
That's a result of Park and Rec.
Yep.
And that will produce hotel rooms, bills eaten.
And I say all that to say gymnastics and cheer, they're very successful. Both programs very successful, led by very good people. And I believe that there is a way to make that loss, that initial upfront loss, a little less. And so I think without impacting the overall services, because again, it's the most utilized program out of everything that we have right now. And so that's huge to say. Looking at the numbers and the growth of that program, it continues to climb, and there's wait list involved in all of that.
Do
So
you think the private businesses would have had 1,000 customers had we not done this? Because
I can't.
those programs have been around for a while.
I can't say with certainty. I can't say with certainty. So it's done a good thing. It's got young girls primarily, involved in parks and recreation. So there is a net benefit to it. But pulling back and looking at holistically and looking at the complete body of work that we've done over the years, that's the one I go back and I'm like, I should have looked at that a little harder because of the impact and that I didn't anticipate.
Okay.
Do you want to jump into the budget?
Yeah, I think we should. I mean,
Yeah.
this is obviously an issue staring the city in the eyes right now. You guys on the council are coming up with different ways to deal with it. We had a $3 million, and correct me if my numbers are off, approximately $3 million downturn in brick and mortar sales tax in the last budget year. Is that correct?
Without seeing the numbers, I don't want to misquote it. It sounds correct, but I'm going to take your word on that without pulling my phone out and pulling it.
I read about the Bears.
Yeah, okay. It sounds about right. So
and that was roughly $3 million less than was collected the previous year.
That's correct, yeah.
And the city had budgeted based on the prior year's collections, which is pretty normal.
Yeah.
There had been a 10-year growth in brick and mortar sales tax in Trussville. So
correct.
It kind of came out of the blue. We've looked pretty deeply into that. What we saw is, in addition to the $3 million downturn, an upshoot in online sales tax collections. Significant upshoot, by the way. Brandon and I talked about this on Unscripted maybe 2 weeks ago. 10 years ago, groceries were almost a non-factor in terms of online sales. Groceries are now the #1 producer of online sales and the sales tax that goes with it. As you know, grocery stores are also a tremendous revenue stream for cities.
They are your largest sales tax base.
Because, Walmart may be bigger, you may spend more there, but you go to the grocery store every single week, and they are the top producer. So here's my question, Ben. If brick and mortar, and I've looked everywhere I could for an expert to tell me it'll be different. I can't find one. If the trend is for brick and mortar sales tax to continue to decline, and we know sales tax accounts for 2/3 of our general budget. If that decline continues and online sales tax continues to go up, the most successful cities in the state of Alabama are going to have a problem. And part of the problem is just the fact that people are buying online instead of in brick and mortar, but the other part of it is the simplified seller's use tax, the online sales tax, is number one, cities are getting gypped, for lack of a better word. State gets their full 4 pennies, counties get their full 2 pennies, cities are getting about half of what they normally get. And my whole point here is the problem is going to continue to get worse unless there is a plan. Do you have a plan?
I do, and so since this is a general conversation, I think it's important for the audience to have an understanding of what seller simplified use tax is when we talk about that. So I'm going to backtrack just a little bit before answering the question. So online sales tax in the state of Alabama, and y'all may remember this, but y'all remember when we used to do our income taxes, and it would ask us, do you have any
online
purchases? Did you have any online purchases you want to claim, right? And so obviously no one answered. No one answered that.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and even if you tried, you just had no way of
tracking
capturing
it.
that.
They're like there's.
And with you, they didn't either.
Exactly. And so I think it's important, and a lot of the argument that I see on social media, a lot of the misinformation that's out there is like, hey, online sales tax has been a thing forever. That's not true. Online sales tax was not mandatory in the state of Alabama until 2019.
That's exactly right. It has not been around forever.
And then what happened in 2020? COVID. So the federal government was pumping local governments full of COVID dollars. And so when you have when you're a city like ours that operates primarily off sales tax, which our budget in this past year, 63.7% of everything we bring in is sales tax. Your property taxes account for 6.8%. So sales tax 63.7, property tax 6.8, and the others are other taxes like auto taxes and permitting fees, yeah, things like that. So the bulk of that is sales tax, right? So you can't make projections when the government is pumping all this money in and it looks like you have more money than you actually do. Right. So there was a benefit. The city benefited a lot from COVID dollars within our community. The school board we probably wouldn't have had without those COVID funds, right? On top of additional, I think we have some police and fire things that also, equipment-wise, that we were able to get from COVID dollars. But all that to say, sales tax was not mandatory in 2019. Now we're finally getting to the point where cities like ours, right?
And can I interject?
Go ahead. Sure.
When the cities got the first online sales tax check, it felt like a godsend.
Yeah.
It was a windfall because it came from zero to something.
Yep.
So you can continue, but nobody was looking at the details.
Exactly. We didn't have the data, and the honest thing is we still don't have the data because the Alabama Department of Revenue won't share the information with us, which is why Trussville, along with the 50+ largest municipalities, kind of have combined forces under the leadership of Mayor Walt Maddox over in Tuscaloosa to really look into this issue and apply pressure to our state legislator to fix the problem. Right. But the reality is, you and I both know, the state of Alabama, our state folks, are now getting more than they've ever had put into their general fund. So
and some of them have no retail whatsoever in their city, but they're now getting
exactly. And you said half, but the reality is it's pennies on the dollar. So using this example, so if I go to I won't name the specific business, but I'll go to one of my favorite men's boutiques here in the city, spend $100, right? If I'm in person, $10 of that I'm going to pay $10 in sales tax. The state of Alabama is always going to get their $4, right? But when I buy something online, or not online, in person, the state's distribution of that, they put $3 into the Education Trust Fund and $1 in the general fund, all right? So stick with me. 2% goes to the county. And then the remaining 4% go to the city, one of which we give to the schools, right? So on that $100 transaction, the city would get $3 and the schools would get $1. If I buy something online, I'm actually getting around 8 cents. The city of Trussville is actually obtaining 8 cents on that transaction, as opposed to the $3 that we normally would get, and the schools get $0. Nothing. They get nothing. Now let's rewind back to the state's distribution for online sales tax. If I buy it online, the state gets their 4 pennies, right? But what they do is put 3% of that in the general fund now, and 1% in the Education Trust Fund, which is why the state of Alabama over the past few years has reported the largest budgets they've ever had. It's because they're taking it directly from local municipalities. And so how do we convince our state legislature? And we have some great ones here, right? How do we convince the state of Alabama and rural Alabama, who's been the benefactor of this for so long now? Now they've got all this money that they've never had before because they have no commercial base. And so now they're going to the bond market with money that they're now getting used to from SSUT distribution.
Oh, wow.
So the state of Tennessee just went through this same problem. There is a roadmap to fix it, but we have to get the state legislators to get behind it and support it and get the fix in place. We have to move to a distribution model. That way, wherever your delivery occurs is the tax rate you pay, and that's the benefactor of those dollars. And that way it's in those communities.
These are online purchases, so we know where they were delivered.
Exactly. Yeah, even mom and pops like us, we know exactly what jurisdiction we're in, and even Amazon and Walmart have told us we know exactly what jurisdiction to pay, and they're willing to pay it. They just need the state to fix the issue. Right. And so that fixes that.
But how do you, when it's benefited the state budget in the dramatic way that it has, how do you motivate the state to make the changes
that's a great question.
Because this is a complicated issue that I don't think most people are dialed into.
They aren't.
You're really good about dialing into it.
We
even had a conversation about
it is going to affect the future of the most successful cities in the state of Alabama more than any other group if it is not resolved.
And Scott's point is, whoever is mayor from this point on, this is major.
Yep.
How do you help lead
all right. So that's exactly right. So we've got to look at this from multiple angles. The first angle is we know that this is not going to be fixed in this year or probably next. Hopefully, right? But we can't plan on that. So how do we balance our budget? So you know this. We're constitutionally mandated to have a balanced budget, right? Last year, we didn't have a balanced budget. We used reserves to pay for it. So we have to address that now. And the way that we do that is through streamlining our government operations. And so our city, 80% of everything we bring in, we direct to staff salaries, right? So there is no other way outside of the discussion that we've had related to trash. You can't use one-time land sales as the permanent solution.
Right.
And so what I proposed and what will go before the council at some point in the next month or so is a early retirement incentive for our employees. We don't want to take a wrecking ball to the system, and we want to reward the employees that have been here a long time. But I will tell you that I can clear up $1.5 to $1.8 million easily through an early retirement incentive. The question may be, well, why haven't you done it already? Because it's so late in the game, it would actually look like it would be a net loss on this year's budget because we only have 4 months left-ish, or a quarter left, and all of that would be applied to this quarter. So if you account for everything that we're going to have to pay out in terms of their comp time on all the
I
other
see
stuff,
what
right?
you're saying.
So
Okay.
we have to cut a check for those people to leave as well. And so we can reward them by paying for their insurance a little earlier than they typically would, because right now you have to have 25 years of service and be the age 55 in the city, all right, in order to qualify for the additional insurance benefit. So by providing an early retirement incentive, which is what I'm proposing, these individuals that have been here a long time are also our highest salaries, okay? And so there are positions that we don't have to replace. There are also positions that we will have to replace, but we can bring in at the bottom of the pay scale. So we can clear up, again, $1.5 to $1.8 million pretty easily without impacting essential services. And so that's one way to address it in the short term, okay? The long-term fix is SSUT. We lost $4.5 million on a conservative estimate. The national average, based on all the research, shows around 16% of all sales are online sales. I completely disagree with that being the case for Trussville. I think that number is much higher because it does not account for our median income, which we know is one of the highest in the Birmingham metro area, and it also doesn't apply to our commercial overall base, right? And so it accounts for the entire country, so poverty-stricken areas and wealthy areas, but I believe that number to be closer to the 20 to 25% range of online sales. And so addressing SSUT fixes two problems. Get the distribution model fixed. We put $4.5 million a year back in the budget. We don't have to talk about trash because we've got the money we need. Right. We also are getting that 1 penny back to the schools, and then we can go to the bond market and fund another project with the additional money that would bring in. So SSUT fixes the school issue, fixes the city issue. But again, in the interim, before that's fixed, we have to have a balanced budget. And the only way to do that is by addressing it on the staff salary side. And when I got hired, as an example, 2011, we had about 125 employees. Either of y'all know how many employees we have today?
I don't know if
300.
350 if you don't count the 50 part-time lifeguards. Those are just kids working the pool in the summer, so I don't count that in the overall numbers. But we have 350 employees now, which is why we're at the 80% mark of where our money goes. We really need to be healthy based from a city planning perspective. We need to be in that 65% range. That's where we need to be. But we also have to do it in a way where we continue to have the same level of service that we have. We don't want to cut police. We don't want to cut fire.
Right.
That's 50% of our overall budget. We spend, it's around 47, I think, when you look at the total numbers. That is where we spend the bulk of our money and where we should be spending our money, because you and I both know to have a healthy and thriving community, we have to have a safe community,
yes,
and we have to have strong schools. Those two things right there are what draw people to Trussville. That's why people come here, and we want them to spend their money here, and that is really, I've given you the short-term solution in my mind. The long-term solution is the state has to fix SSUT, and that's why we're combining forces with the 50 largest municipalities in the state and ALM in order to apply pressure and get this thing resolved as quickly as possible.
Okay.
And so on top of SSUT, what we didn't talk about is online sales tax is 8%. We've got to do something to help our small businesses in this community, and we've already put them at a disadvantage. The state of Alabama put our small business owners that are willing to invest their dollars and build out these facilities and these buildings and these stores at a disadvantage, because I'm paying 10% in person, but I can buy the same item online, pay 8%, it'll be at my door the next day. So
And it's
we got to
nice
fix
to
it.
say,
We got to make it easy.
encourage people to shop local.
That only
and
goes so
we
far.
all do, but it only
Yeah.
goes so far, and you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I got to be honest, I don't think the 2% difference has caused anybody to buy online in general. There may be exceptions to that, but I could see the benefit of it being the same tax amount online as it is
I,
at brick
and I'm going to push back on you just a little bit. All right. Best Buy, just use Best Buy as our example. All right. You're getting same day or next day delivery. You're going in store, and you don't think it's impacted, but look at their footprint. All of these larger stores are pushing
I
outwards,
agree
right?
I'm buying a washer or dryer or an electronic
Right.
system. I'm
Higher
investing
dollar items.
Several hundreds
Yeah.
of dollars. Yeah, that's going to, 2% might make a little bit of difference there. But I see items being ordered online for $8. I don't think the 2 cents is changing anything.
Yeah.
So I think it's a mindset that's not going to reverse.
It won't. Y'all see the Kroger delivery trucks every day.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it's
Like,
just coming to
it's
my
a-
house.
Yep, and I'm guilty too. We're all guilty of it. Amazon shows up at my house too.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, and I don't consider it guilty. I just consider it efficiency.
It is, and it's convenient, and which is why, to Scott's point, it's here to stay. And if we don't fix it, it will be the demise of local towns.
And honestly,
cities.
I had it really, even though I thought about it with Amazon purchases and things like that, I really had not thought about it with groceries until he looked up the figure saying
blew
that
my mind.
groceries
Yep.
is now the top online. And
Yep.
so that I was like, ooh, and for a second I did feel guilty.
I had the graph. That is the last thing I thought I was going to see when I started researching online sales. I looked for I looked for an expert anywhere that would say it's going to level off or it's going to reverse. That person does not exist because nobody believes it.
It is here to stay, and I think in the next 10 years, probably half of everything that we have will be online.
I think it could be, which is why I say we don't fix it. It's going to hurt the best cities first.
We won't be able to afford to fix our roads and infrastructure because we won't have the money to do it.
That's right.
So that might have been more than you wanted, but
No,
do you,
we wanna dig in
actually,
deep
one more
on
question.
everything.
Do you think that the state is open? They know that it's going to have to change.
I think.
Because
I-
this is an important issue
I think
in
so.
the governor's race. Then.
I really think that we have a better understanding now. So they've attempted this in the past, and it was stopped by the Rural Caucus when they tried to get a fix implemented because rural Alabama was the
Right.
benefactor. But when you look at it now with the data that
Are
we
you
have,
talking about the bill a year ago?
a year or 2 years ago, all of it kind of muddies.
Okay.
All of it kind of muddies.
I'm on
Do some
correct
research.
you slightly
Yeah,
on
go ahead.
that. The problem with the bill a year ago, which was also led by Walt Maddox, is the Big Ten mayors wanted an exorbitant percentage of that because they said we're the retail centers,
yeah.
and we were going to get tossed another little bone. And
No,
I was kind of
no doubt. Yeah, no doubt on that. And I am familiar with the percentage of the Big Ten.
Walt has seen the light.
Yeah. And they have a better understanding. Hey, to get this through, we got to unite.
We need all the cities that we
Yeah.
just tried to screw over.
And so again, not the fix that was best for the whole of Alabama,
No.
but I think now that we have a better understanding, and now we understand. So you look at what Kroger has been able to succeed with, right? They have 11 stores in the state of Alabama, and they have one distribution center here in Jefferson County. They are fulfilling orders across the entire state of Alabama from primarily one distribution center.
Yeah.
So we have hundreds of Dollar Generals. Dollar Generals are the main driver for rural Alabama economies.
Yes.
Okay? That is their main tax base.
They're the Walmart.
If we do not address this, eventually Dollar General can say, I don't have to have these hundreds of stores. I can move to distribution centers and I can have deliveries just like Kroger. That is going to kill rural Alabama. So I think rural Alabama, we have a better argument on how we can approach them to make them realize, hey, this is in the best interest in the long run for your communities as well. And so really it's just about educating people at this point and really applying that pressure. The state of Alabama is still going to get their 4%. And it doesn't matter to me. I think it's I think more should go to the Education Trust Fund personally. But the reality is it doesn't matter because they're getting their 4%. We just need them to fix the local side and make it distribution based. That's all, delivery based.
I won't speak specifically for our legislators, but I will say they both understand the issue.
Yeah.
They both agree it's got to get fixed. One's more optimistic than the other.
Yep.
And one sees the more rural communities as a pushback.
Yep.
So, but I think they're both willing.
Okay, let's talk about staying in the area of budget. So in the last 10 to 15 years, the city's found itself in a situation where you could say that you guys were forced, and I mean, you weren't in all those administrations, obviously.
Yeah.
Or you could say it seems we're able to make a decision to buy up property
Yeah.
to keep something from happening here that the people who live here didn't want to happen. Yeah. And every time it happened, it was all, I mean, there was nobody standing around saying, you shouldn't do that. We were all, yay. And, you know, I can think of 3 just right here. So
We can walk to a couple of them.
Yeah. So, and at the time, that seemed like a major win that Trussville was able to do that. But I think because of everything we've been talking about, those days are over for now, likely. So how do you work either through planning and zoning or just the ability to say no, I guess? How do you handle these situations in the future when you can't buy us out of a problem?
All right, so I'm going to answer this question, but I'm going to backtrack to one specific issue that has been a topic of conversation in the community, and there's been a lot of misinformation and sensationalism on the part of some other folks that are running for office. So let's cover Service Road, exactly. Let's talk about the Service Road. It was in unincorporated Jefferson County, which means the city of Trussville had no ability to control that land without acquiring it. So there was a contract for $5 million on that property for that 75 acres with an apartment developer. Phase 1 was going to be 450 units. Jefferson County Code would have allowed up to 750 units of apartments on Service Road. Okay, we could have done nothing. We could have done nothing. We would have benefited from those individuals buying in our stores, but they would have also put additional strain on our roads and our infrastructure. And I can say this again. I consider myself an expert in the field in a number of capacities, and from a law enforcement capacity. The majority of violent crime occurs within a quarter mile of an apartment complex. So you look at doing nothing, receiving nothing. We would have had to hire additional police officers to staff that side of town. Maybe not in years 1 through 3, but eventually that would have turned. So we would have had to hire, if you hired 1 additional police officer for that side of town for every shift, we would have had to hire 6 police officers. Our police officers, when you account for their pay, their equipment, and their insurance, and the liability insurance, because law enforcement, there's liability, it's $150,000 per police officer, okay, times 6. That would have been a reoccurring cost in perpetuity with no net benefit to the city of Trussville. So what did we do? We bought that land for what it was under contract for. We mitigated the unit count. The only way someone's going to pay $5 million for land is if they can get the unit count to get the money that they need out of it. The only way to get a lower density is to allow a lower price. So we shopped it around. $3 million was the best deal on the table. All right. So it looks like a $2 million upfront loss. That's not reality. Okay. I want people to understand that. With 190 units, it's actually 180 something. They lose a few more every day, and I'm fine with that. Okay. But if we'll just do the math on 190 units, you look at what the ad valorem taxes on 190 units are. You look at what the permitting fees up front are. For 190 units, we're immediately going to collect $1 million in permitting. So now we're down to $1 million loss. $1 million loss on 190 units of ad valorem tax. We break even in years 2.5. That's where we're at. So we don't make decisions.
And we stopped 700 apartments.
And we stopped 700 apartments, and I don't have to hire additional police officers and lose that money in perpetuity.
Which would have been 900,000 according to your numbers.
Exactly. Every single year, we would have had that loss with nothing coming in. Here, we break even. We get all $5 million back in years 2.5 after the development's done. So I need to be clear on that. Right. After the development's done, and all 190 units are developed or bringing in ad valorem taxes, year 2.5 is where the break even's at. And then after that, the city brings in money. So it is not a $2 million loss. That is not reality. And I just want people to understand that because they see a headline or they read some misinformation. I think it's just very important to understand that we look at all of these issues holistically and understand that even if we had to take a $2 million loss, I still would have said it's the right decision. You don't factor in take the police officers out of the equation, take the ad valorem out of the equation. Stopping 750 apartments, knowing what that does from a crime standpoint in your community, or what potentially could happen from a crime standpoint in your community, it's the right call each and every time.
Well, and when you guys made it at the time, I didn't hear anybody complaining then.
Yeah.
Just to be honest, I mean,
everybody was.
And that's the thing. We had the money in our reserve and general fund. We've been fiscally conservative forever in this community. Last year we had a loss because of a dip in sales tax. This year we passed a budget with a deficit, knowing that we would make up the deficit in the end. We're going to have a balanced budget at the end of the year. I'm confident in that. We pulled this money out and paid cash out of our reserves because we could. We could have gone to the bond market. We could have paid a mortgage on it. we probably wouldn't have had a bond downgrade because of it, because we would have had that money in our reserve fund. But why pay interest on something when you have the cash and ability to pay for it up front? And so that's kind of the look at that. Glendale Farms is another one, all right? So that's another property that's come under question. And, we're going to end up making, well, hopefully, depending on where the offers end finally, we're going to make money on that. And so we're going to be in a good place there as well. And all of that started as a large development for the Carrington community. It was going to be, man, it's been a few years since I've looked at this. I think 190 units, I think was the total, maybe a little bit more than that.
Yeah, a lot of high density.
Yeah, it was very tight. It was very tight. And not only that, there was going to be a school out there. They were offering, this developer was offering the acreage to build a school, but the reason I voted no against that, one, the density was a concern, but I would have loved to have a bridge and connectivity to Carrington from a ingress and egress standpoint for law enforcement and our fire. And so I feel like, when I voted no against that, one of the another main reason inside of that was inside that development deal, the developer wanted us to pay for that main road all the way through.
And also wanted to pay for the bridge that he had promised everyone.
Yeah, and
just didn't tell everybody that he was going to ask Trussville
to
pay for it.
And then they also wanted us to pay them for grading the land on the donated land for the school. And so that was a bad deal for Trussville. So
yeah, and I should also point out, it was not the best piece of land in that parcel.
It was not. It was definitely not.
It would have cost them too much to develop it, which is why they were giving it to the schools.
Exactly. And so, go ahead.
Well, no, go ahead.
And so that went away. We denied that. Planning and zoning, the council, we shut that down. Okay. Now I negotiated for months trying to get the best deal we could get out of that. In the end, it just didn't make sense. So that land eventually went up for auction. We still had a need for a site for a school, and we were hopeful that the ad valorem tax would pass. And so a lot of people also, I think just it's important to give you my frame of mind. They say that we voted for a tax increase. No, that is not what happened. The city council is giving the citizens of Trussville the ability to decide yes or no.
Right.
This is not the council putting a tax on you. This was, hey, we feel like this deserves the community's vote. We need your voice in this. Obviously, that didn't pass, but we had to be prepared if it did pass so we could build that new school. And so now that it hasn't passed, it makes no sense to maintain that land for no reason. We've applied for grants and been unsuccessful related to those, so it just doesn't make sense to continue to pay debt service on something forever without a known use for it, right?
Without a plan.
You were correct when you say that all the council did was vote to let the people decide
That's it.
on the property tax.
Yeah.
To that end, the property tax failed.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about passing garbage fees to the people.
Mm-hmm.
This is not something you haven't heard. There are people in the community that feel like because they voted against the property tax, the city is punishing them by making them start paying for the garbage fees. How do you address that?
Yeah, so I would say in relation to the trash, you have to look at it from a logical perspective. I would say, one, let's clear it up. It's not punishment. I'd be punishing myself as well. I live here. I don't want to pay trash either. I also know the negative impact that passing a trash fee on to the citizens will cause. We have a clean community. We want it to maintain, its beauty that we have. We don't want it to go downwards. Right. And so you have to look at it holistically, though. So in 2001, when this deal was made, and a lot of people say, well, my property taxes pay for that. Let me be clear. The property taxes account for 6.8% of everything we bring in. Trash cost us 5.8% of our expenses, our entire expense sheet. Okay. So in 2001, when they made this deal, this is prior to me living here. Okay. It was to increase the sales tax from 9 to 10%. And correct me, you were here, Scott. Right. So it was the right call then, right? And so in order to make that palatable, and that was a vote to increase sales tax, that's the vote of the council. And increasing sales tax is not something that I'm a fan for, I'm not a proponent for. I think that will harm small business. I don't think that's the right solution, right? So which is why we went the property tax route and let the community decide, okay? I don't think we should increase our sales tax. But all that to say, we have to, lost my train of thought for a second, so let me see, this is what happens when we have unedited stuff here.
It is fine.
Oh, man.
I'll grab water while you're doing it.
That's a smart move. So we have to identify ways to obviously the school needs still exist, right? So let's go there. the only logical way in my mind, well, you asked trash fee, but we still have a school need, but we've got to, one, address the needs that we have here. So trash fees are not punishment. We have to look at it logically.
Most people pay them.
They do. When you look at,
I checked today because I also saw the claim. I've already paid for my garbage with my ad valorem taxes. Okay, there's 35 cities in Jefferson County, and I checked. 5 of them pay for the residents' garbage collection. 30 cities residents pay for their own garbage.
And I'm not,
we're one of those 5.
And I'm not defending the position as well.
Right.
But when you look at the ad valorem taxes that those communities pay compared to ours, we pay 62 mills. You look at the chart of those other communities that are paying for their trash; they're much higher, and they bring in far more ad valorem than we do. Yeah. All right, so
not out of 35 cities. We're one of the better producers.
I'm talking about out of the ones that pay for trash. Out of the the ones that pay for trash. You look at the millage. Yeah, ignore the 35. I'm just saying the ones that are paying right now.
The 5 paying.
We are the bottom of that list.
They are.
We are the bottom of that list.
Might be 4th out of 5.
Which city?
I think we're probably a little better than Hoover.
Hoover pays.
They're going to have a lot more numbers, but I think our ad valorem brings in more.
Okay, interesting. All right, I thought their ad valorem was 75 and ours 62 mills. Or 71. I thought they were a little higher.
Meal. You think the value per meal?
The value per meal is less.
I think the value per meal is better in Trussville than in Hoover.
Okay.
Really?
All right.
Now, I don't think that's
I'll have
the
to
case
research that one.
But
Yeah, we'll look that up.
and I think Homewood's the other. They're probably about even with us. And Hoover is probably in there with us. I think our property values might be a little better.
I'm with you on that, but they're also paying, so we're paying 62 mills.
Yeah.
Homewood, I know for a fact, is paying 75 mills. So they're higher on the millage chart, but I understand what you're saying in terms of, I get that all day. But I lost my train of thought again, Scott. Where was I on that?
Well, we were discussing whether or not the garbage fees would be
the history of that. That's right.
The punishment of that.
Yeah.
And staying on the garbage fees.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You got something? I saw your pen in the air.
No, that's okay. I'll come back to it.
She'll take something off if I.
Yeah. To the garbage fees point. So 2001, the city of Trussville paid $500,000. Right. All right. This year we budgeted 2.672, so $2,672,000. Right.
Okay.
This next year we know it's $2.9 million. Okay. So we know that continues to rise. So right now, out of the expense sheet, 5.8% of everything we spend goes to trash. Next year it'll climb just over 6%. That is going to continue to climb, all right?
What is your plan for trash?
So my plan for trash, if we can avoid, for as long as possible, again, the fix to SSUT is the long-term solution to that. But had we taken a vote for trash, my plan was to exempt everybody 65 and up. I say exempt, not the right terminology, subsidize, make it, because you've got to be careful in the language and the legal language and all of that. But my plan was for anybody that, again, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare qualified, that they would.
I'm about to turn 65. I don't think I should not be paying it if my neighbor across the street.
And again, that's the hope, right?
Yeah.
But that's the easiest way to do it without specifying a specific age. I say 65, but that's when you qualify for Medicaid and Medicare. That 65 age is kind of a way we can do it without specifying age. But it would be an application process, so you would have to apply for that subsidy each year. Okay. For those that are 65 and up that want to contribute, that would be one way to do it. So that was to soften the blow if trash fees were the long-term solution for this issue. I think, again, expedited retirement, early retirement incentives, we can cut enough without impacting essential services that we can avoid having to remove trash in its entirety. So I think we've stepped away from that. Now we had to analyze it.
Yeah.
Like we have to research, we have to have data, and it is still a potential viable solution. And if SSUT isn't fixed, it doesn't matter who is in the office. That is going to be what comes back up.
So, and why can't we meet in the middle? Why can't the city put in half and residents put in half?
In year one, that was kind of, again, part of the plan that I had planned to present in terms of the stipulations that I was going to put on it had I voted for it, was that in year one, we were going to cover half no matter what, right, to soften the blow in that year. Mm-hmm. But when you look at and again, I think, and I don't want to speak for our current mayor, but when you look at your options being, here is one way to generate revenue, otherwise my alternative is I have to cut staff, I get where that's a complicated conversation, right? So
yeah, but at the same time, you are suggesting attrition, let some of the costs be reduced through attrition.
Yeah, so and we've been,
early buyouts.
yeah, we've done quite a bit through attrition already to help us balance it on this year. But the early retirement incentive, I think, is really the way to address that. We can put, again, 1.5 to 1.8 as a conservative estimate, in my opinion, and then coming up with the additional $1 million on that trash side. I think we have that, and so we can cover trash in that way. But SSUT, again, is the long-term solution. This is the short-term solution.
Okay, let's go back to Service Road as our example, because I kind of have that planning and zoning question. Service Road has not closed, correct?
Service Road is not closed?
Is not
Selling.
Oh, yeah,
sold.
yeah. No,
The sale is
it has not. It has not been
Y'all
finalized
have not been
yet.
to the closing
Correct.
table.
Correct. Not yet.
Right. Okay.
Hopefully this next month. I think July.
Okay. Is there a way, from the planning and zoning perspective, to work with landowners to maybe to better forecast things like that, to avoid situations like that? Is that realistic?
Sort of, right? So there is I think planning and zoning has to do a better job of long-term planning, but these and they do a good job of getting things out of developers when projects come before them.
They can only the policy has to be there.
Correct. Yeah, that's where I'm going with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so in terms of updating the things that need to be updated, and I've said this in a few videos, but our subdivision regulations haven't been updated since 1978.
Oh, wow.
1978 hasn't been touched.
Yeah.
All right, and so I think we've already started some groundwork. We've made some changes to the ordinances since then. So we've changed the lot sizes for garden homes from 50 to 75 to kind of hopefully mitigate some of these things. But more work has to be done on updating those subdivision regulations. And then I think planning and zoning also has to look at, and again, we might have to do this from a city staff standpoint, really, is probably that makes the most sense, is look at those pockets of Trussville that are still unincorporated but surrounded by us, and we have to actively pursue those and convince those property owners that, hey, this is the right call, let's get you annexed into Trussville. That way we can control the land. That way we're not running into the issue like we had on Service Road where we're having to play defense.
Okay.
Right?
That was my question.
And we've got large parcels on Deerfoot where we're facing the exact same.
Yeah.
We are. The
In the
bottom,
heart of Trussville.
Highway 11 at Deerfoot, there's a pocket of unincorporated county there, and right across from my home, there's pockets of unincorporated there. And so same with Trussville Clay Road. So there are pockets that exist that we have to, from a city standpoint, really have to be proactive in trying to convince these property owners to come into our city. But again, it comes down to respecting property owner rights and following the law that exists. A lot of people are like, hey, we can put a moratorium on all houses. We can't do that. Like we can't do that. It's not realistic. It's not legally defensible. And I feel like there's not a reason to waste taxpayer dollars on lawyers when we know we're going to lose that. Okay.
Can I just play this out, because we've covered
Sure.
a lot of subdivision, proposed subdivision, completed subdivisions from planning and zoning out. Okay, if you're talking about a moratorium on building for 12 months, and I've heard that suggested.
Yeah.
You're talking about 2 years for a plan to come to fruition, to go through planning and zoning, to have your engineering done. That takes 2 years. If you put a moratorium on building for 12 months, Trussville has been the fastest growing city in Jefferson County for 20 years. Based on yearly estimates from the Census Bureau, it will be the fastest growing Jefferson city in Jefferson County for 30 years at the end of this current decade. I can tell you the only thing you can do to derail that is stop building for 12 months.
Yep.
The time it would take to crank back up would be devastating to the city.
Yep.
It would be devastating. It'd be devastating to everything we're trying to accomplish in Trussville. So
Yeah,
I've looked at that, and I don't see how that could do anything but hurt our city.
So being the liaison to planning and zoning, I'm with you, Scott. Stopping it holistically is not the right decision, and it goes against everything. So I went and got certified in city planning. All right, so the University of North Alabama, I went and finished those certifications out, and it goes against all the data, all the research. You do not do that to your city unless you want to kill it. And so now there is a way to slow the tap,
Yes,
right? And that is
yes.
by updating the subdivision regulations, requiring specific things, requiring specific amounts of parks and trees be saved. All of those things can be implemented in your subdivision regs, and it will slow down the growth that we're seeing, the speed at which we see it, but it'll still encourage smart and good growth.
Would you be willing to increase impact fees for new homes being
Oh
built
yes,
in Trussville?
I've been working on this for a while and plan to do that before I leave here. So there's a lot of research that has to go into that, and so in order to make those legally defensible, so we have to hire an outside firm, and I've identified a firm that does this work. They did it for Orange Beach and Gulf Shores and a few other spots in Alabama. So there is a model that exists, but in order for the distribution of those impact fees, you have to have empirical-based research in order for it to say, hey, this amount of money goes here, this amount of money goes here to Parks and Rec, to public safety, to whatever the case may be. But I'm a huge believer in impact fees. Again, it's not going to discourage development because there's constitutional cap. Well, there's a constitutional cap specific to Baldwin County, but we don't want to be the test case either. So we have to limit impact fees to 1% of the overall value of whatever that home is going to be, but that adds an additional $400,000 to $600,000 a year in your city's general fund, which is advantageous.
They are impacting our roads. They are impacting our schools. And while we want the growth, we really need them to pay their way when they come in.
So I'm proposing, and hopefully, and I've mentioned this before at a community event, but I'm hoping to convince the county. It'll cost us about $70,000 to hire this firm to come in and do the research and provide us the legally defensible mechanism in which we can justify what part of the fee goes where. And so if you have that in place, we can prevent unnecessary lawsuits. And so that's phase one, and then you can implement the fees. We can't just copy and paste, Helena or Gulf Shores. We can't copy and paste theirs because all of that research that went into that model is different based on the city
specific
that you live in.
For that model. Okay, so I don't want to oversimplify, but you would deal with the budget shortfall by multiple areas. One, encouraging early buyouts for retirements and things like that, lowering the workforce through attrition, not a significant reduction in the workforce. We want to lower that down to where we're not paying 80% on the salaries. Impact fees, again, I'm glad you brought it up because that was also part of adding that that additional money into the general fund. So the combination of those two things, we're looking at $2.5 million that we can kind of free up, right? So. And also by going to work with the state legislature in revamping the SSUT tax.
Yeah, that is the long-term solution for all of this.
And it's got to be done.
It does.
I'm an outsider looking in, but this is going to affect every city in the Tribune coverage area that get fixed.
Yep.
Are there other areas where for a certain amount of time that Trussville may just have to live in a more lean fashion? Is there other fat to cut from the budget?
I think you'll see through the expedited retirement and the attrition, I think you'll see that slowly start to come down. But we do. And that's another thing. So you have 10 years of positive growth. It makes utilizing a projection-based model for making a budget pretty easy to do. But I think we have to move back, and this is where I got to give Mayor Melton credit. We've got to move back to the leaner times when he was mayor in terms of utilizing a flatline budgeting approach. So whatever we brought in for the prior year, we have to use for this year. We can't project growth that we have been able to over the past 10 years because of all the market uncertainty that we see. I think utilizing projections, while there's nothing wrong with it, and we've been successful in the past, personally, I would use a flatline budgeting approach to prevent these issues from occurring. That way, if we're wrong, we're wrong, and here's the data that supports it, right? So, and we don't have to worry as much about pulling from our general fund to offset that deficit. So
you've sat here, and it's obvious, everybody that comes and sits down, that you spend a lot of time. You cannot even attempt to do this job without being really familiar with the numbers.
Yeah.
So does Trussville need to consider a city manager in the future?
I think in the future, you putting in the future, I think that there are benefits to having a city manager. I think in the situation that we find ourselves in, and I'm going to point to myself, I'm not going to speak to the others. I think having someone that has worked in the city of Trussville and has been a part of this government through good times and bad times, because when I got hired, there were hiring freezes. I didn't get step raises for the first few years that I was here, right? So I think having someone that understands the complexities of the issues that we face today and have seen where we started and where we are now, I think there's a benefit to having somebody in the mayor position that is making far less than what the city of Trussville would pay for a city manager. Now, if you were to talk about a city manager in a hybrid role, city manager / economic developer, that changes the conversation in my mind. But solely as an administrative head, personally, I do not feel when you have qualified candidates in the mayor's position that can run the city, I don't feel like we should waste an additional $200,000 in salaries out of our general fund just for somebody to be the administrative head. And I also don't want to create an unnecessary barrier between this position, whoever the administrative head of the city is, either the mayor or the city or city manager. I don't want to create an unnecessary barrier between them and the voters. Right? You can vote for a mayor if you don't like the direction of a city. You can vote and change things. City manager, you would have to clean house in order to make a change there. So I don't think we're to the point where we need one. But in the future, or in that hybrid role, there could be a benefit.
Development, that's interesting. Okay, let's talk about schools because you have kids at Payne.
I do.
And
the
so-
University of Payne Elementary
That's
School.
right. So as you know, just to restate it for everybody, largest elementary school in the state.
1,350-ish.
Yes. You know, I'm a Cobba parent. You're a Payne parent. I said in another interview that I don't think, even though all the schools perform really well, I don't feel like it's fair to the families at Payne compared to the experience we get at Cahaba, just even logistically.
Yeah.
Like getting in and out of the school, going to events, parking.
I would love to walk to Cobb Elementary School
Yeah, just
and avoid Payne car line.
The Payne kids are getting a great education,
Yes.
but they're not having the same experience as some of our
Well, and
other
it's
students.
not as easy for families just to
Right.
be in and
Yeah.
out. You know, car lines different. Everything is different.
Yeah.
But in the current state, do you feel like it is not in the city's future, or is it in the city's future to get that fourth elementary school? Will the city be able to help contribute in any way, or is the school system just going to have to be on its own and figuring that out? Is that a fair question?
It is a fair question, and so I will say I love Payne Elementary School. I think my daughter.
Everybody does. I mean, I don't know anybody doesn't
I
love
think
it.
my daughter, she's going into 5th grade, has no idea. Right now, I've got friends that have and friends that teach at both schools, or all 3 schools really, and so there is definitely a difference between Cahaba and Magnolia, and Scott can speak to the empirical and the research in and of itself that show community-based schools are the right way to go. But the reality we find ourselves in is we don't have an immediate fix for that, and so without a fix to SSUT, I don't believe the city's going to be in a position to contribute in that way. We will have a 4th elementary school. That I have no doubt. But when does that happen? Without a fixed SSUT, we have to wait for debt service to fall off in order to pay for that new elementary school.
And could there be some value in doing that, letting some pay off and using?
Yes, yeah, there's definite value there. So obviously they've got the C wing figured out. I think the elementary school, in my opinion, is probably the next fix that needs to occur. Again, 1,350 students, but I also feel like, and again, I'd be curious to how others feel out there. Those that are attending the University of Payne Elementary are well prepared for the middle school in terms of
100%.
the environment,
Like,
right?
I don't want
So
to
there are some positives and
Yes.
negatives there. You know,
That's a
may
whole
be.
different conversation.
They may be because of the size.
and
the
not
volume
not
they're used
education
to.
wise. The education wise, they're all
No,
yeah.
but
I feel like
I
they're all on
don't
good
know,
field.
I don't know that they're ready to eat lunch in their classroom.
That's fair.
Half the time.
That's fair.
And as someone whose wife spent 7 years at Hewitt Trussville Junior High, why after the cafeteria had been bulldozed into the sinkhole,
Yeah.
playing lunchroom monitor and Spanish teacher,
That's
I
rough.
can tell you, she wants no part of that again.
Yeah.
And I don't think any teachers need some adult contact during the day.
No doubt. And
they're
putting
not
that
getting it at the
Well,
middle.
and I
and
don't
putting
wanna-
that on there, like, I will say they're all important projects, and they all have to happen.
are.
So there
They
is
are. And I agree
there is
with
no
you.
doubt.
I think your priority list is right. I think the elementary school should be next. The new elementary school should be next. But my point is, I don't think we can afford to let the middle school go much longer
No.
either. I think it's
No.
got to be right on the tail.
Yeah,
of it.
we've got to have the fix in place, and I think getting the SSUT fixed, and I'm hopeful that we can get it in the next 2 years. I think we apply full court press on our state in order to get
Well,
that
if you've
fixed.
got the league involved, that's helpful.
Yeah, it does.
So,
We're
we're making strides,
Yeah.
right?
I agree.
And so I think that will allow us to do one of the other projects, and then debt service falling off allows us to do the next one.
Okay. and those you just have to wait. And I don't want any hate mail from Payne people. I asked that question.
No, it's a fair
of every
question.
candidate in defense of Payne.
And, and I'm the only one with kids in the schools.
Yeah,
so
so-
I'm the only one with kids in the schools.
We love Payne, and
Yeah.
and my kids went there. My daughter went there until until Cobb opened.
Yeah. What year
so
did Payne
no,
open? My little brother might have gone to Payne. I can't
Yeah.
remember. What year did that open?
It's a massive school,
Around
and people in Trussville deserve
1999?
another.
Yeah, so
elementary school.
he definitely went to Payne. I did not. I went to the high school, but I feel like he was on
Does
the
that
tail
sound
end
right
of
to
it.
you? 99, 2000,
Yeah.
2000?
I remember, I'm admitting to a speeding ticket here, but I remember when I got my first speeding ticket at 16 years old, driving on Green Drive, speeding on Green Drive.
It's easy to do.
Yeah.
We used to always do
And
it.
Carl Chambly, who
Because nobody's ever on
that's
that
right,
road.
that's right. Carl Chambly was the judge then, and he's the judge now. And I remember going before him, and he made me do community service, and I had to clean Payne Elementary School.
Nice.
So-
I love that. Are you good there?
Yeah, I just
'Cause I wanted to
wanted to
shelf,
clarify
if we could.
that I, again, asked that question in defense of Payne families. I just feel like Trussville deserves another school.
We do.
So it's an important
Yeah.
thing to think
not
about.
not
How
just
do we get
not
it?
just deserves. I mean, we've got to have it.
Yeah.
We've got to have the fixes to our because y'all know this, and we've talked about it. Our schools are the economic engine
Right.
of this city. They are, and that's safe streets, quality schools, and we've got to continue to make sure they're successful.
Yeah, because
So.
we're so
Well,
fortunate.
they're certainly the catalyst for the growth. There's just no way around that.
Yeah.
Which leads me to kind of almost a rhetorical question, but I'm going to let you address it in general.
Okay.
As and municipal elections for a local paper are a big deal.
Yeah.
We cover 9 cities, so that's 9 mayoral elections, and because everybody doesn't have 5 council members, 48
Holy moly.
council races that we will be addressing. The part I don't like about municipal elections is the experts on social media who have never actually been to a council meeting but are suddenly experts on everything. The overall tone that I've gotten from some people, and some of these comments are on our own Tribune Facebook page, Trussville City Schools are arguably one of the top 5 to 7 school districts in the state of Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Our property taxes our property values have gone through the ceiling since those schools opened.
And to that point, we have one of the lower millages as
Yes,
well.
We're middle of the pack, bottom half
Yep.
of millage in Jefferson County. Our home values have gone up tremendously. Our schools are highly ranked. Disposable income in Trussville, according to the U.S. Census, household income, one of the highest in the state of Alabama.
Yeah.
We have taken a downtown that was an eyesore, and now we have cities all over Jefferson County coming to look at it and figure out how to do it in their own city. But to look online, Trussville fell off a cliff and is at the bottom of that cliff in a burning heap now.
Yeah.
How do you address that when you know that is so far from reality?
And a lot of it is, doing my best to avoid the open meeting, like violating anything in the Open Meeting Act for decisions that haven't been made yet. So people will hop on social media, and then the narrative is that we are on this cliff and we're about to fall off, but that's just not reality. And so I think community outreach is a big part of that. I think that I have a different communication style than some of my fellow counselors and our current mayor a little bit. And so I think just educating the general public and being willing to have the dialogue, listen to the angry folks, listen to their concerns, and then just provide them with raw data and information. So this financial cliff that everyone feels we're on, that's not reality. It's not the downgrade in our bond rating. I do have some issues with what was stated inside of that. That they talk about not having a plan. That's not true. I've outlined some of the plan that we've discussed from a finance committee standpoint. For reoccurring revenue, they assumed that we would issue bonds for schools when we didn't have money, but we were only going to do that had the ad valorem tax passed. So all of these assumptions and the ability not to address them are what truly led to that. The only thing I agree with in there, and again, we probably should have been downgraded because we utilized our reserves, but we utilized our reserves in a financially sound way. We did it to avoid paying interest on something when we didn't have to. And so I think and I'm hopeful that the vast majority of Trussville really understands that this narrative, this sensationalized narrative that we are in such a financial dire strait is just absolutely false, and because that is.
I shared with our audience when it first came up that when I was handed the information from Standard & Poor's and saw the downgrade, and I hate to even call it a downgrade, from AA plus to AA.
We went from an A plus to an A. Okay.
Yeah, from an A plus to an A, which is what most cities already are. I then read the verbiage, and based on Chris's reporting alone from Trussville council meetings, I knew the verbiage was completely wrong.
Yeah.
So the judgment used by that group to make that rating adjustment was entirely incorrect, and I just knew that from reading the local newspaper.
Yep.
So I did want to address that because it is discouraging, and I'll give you an example. Last week's council meeting, Chris put it up. I looked at the comments the next day. In that council meeting, we had 2 developers show 2 new subdivisions, well-designed, very compact, very well thought out, with homes that are actually going to end up $500,000 to $1 million.
Easily, yep.
In fact, I think the townhomes are going to go well over $1 million very quickly. That's my gut feeling on those, because I think they're going to be in demand. And all they talked about was the garbage tax, the garbage fee that we actually put off in that same council meeting. Completely ignored the fact that people are coming and building $500,000 to $1 million homes in your town, which means your house is worth more than it ever was. It is already worth more than it ever was. So that's frustrating to me.
I think, and this is important for anybody that finds themselves on council, one of your priorities, for those that are fortunate enough to be elected, one of your priorities in this role is to ensure that you're protecting people's property values. That, in my mind, is one of the primary roles of this job, is to protect property values. And I think the decisions planning and zoning has made over the years, we get a lot of, I'm going to go down this rabbit hole for a second. We get a lot of blame. Our current administration and our current planning and zoning board get a lot of blame for all of this growth that we see. But I think it's important for people to understand that the 20% of our population in the city of Trussville can be attributed to 3 subdivisions: Stockton, Carrington, Longmeadow.
Right.
All of those subdivisions were approved long before any of us were involved in this process. And so I think we're now seeing a lot of those come to close. They're finishing out. And we got a density reduction out of Trussville Springs. That was going to be 586 units. Planning and zoning and the council were able to successfully get that number lowered to the low 400s. And I think it'll be less than that by the time it's all said and done. So we've made moves over this administration to slow the growth that we need to slow so we can get our infrastructure to the place that it's at without straight up stopping it. And so I think we've done a good job there. Obviously, there's more work to be done in terms of the subdivision regulations, but we have to grow. And to say, hey, I'm going to talk about this trash fee when we're talking about somebody wanting to build $1 million homes right here in walking distance. And you said townhomes, and they're not townhomes anymore, but
that's right.
They changed it, so it's 14 houses.
Yeah. Over here where the antique
the antique mall.
Yeah.
So it's 14 houses, very well designed, and this builder builds here in Trussville, Mountain Brook, and Vestavia, Cobb Heights, and so
premier location.
Yeah, I mean it is. Yeah. I don't have the money to live there, but I wish I did, because it would be wonderful to be in a setup like that. I want to kind of shift over a little bit.
Sure.
5 years ago,
I should have brought 2 waters.
We got more. 5 years ago, you were here for the political forums, running for council for the first time. One of the big issues 5 years ago.
Hey, before you say it, let me see if I got this. It's the only campaign promise that I haven't come through with yet. Are you about to ask me about the project? Or are you going somewhere else?
No, I was going somewhere altogether.
We'll talk about the project next, because I think it's important for people to know my thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's good.
I was curious.
The big issue 5 years ago was the school board appointment process.
Yeah.
It was driven primarily by the fact, and the community had a pretty strong feeling about this. I get a lot of the blame because I'm the loudmouth that has talked about it for 10 years. And I would really like for somebody to get elected and take this argument away from me, because I'm tired of arguing about it. But the argument that led to the argument was that every single school board appointee that wanted to be reappointed was always reappointed.
Yeah.
And the feeling in the community was that a small group was controlling a small group and controlling the appointments. Leading into this administration, Zach Steele, former Councilman Zach Steele, had put up a big fight over this rubber stamping reappointments to the school board. And somebody, in fact, one of your opponents ran against him and was elected. And one of the big issues was the appointment process. I pushed for public interviews.
Yeah.
I have pushed for transparency and accountability. I got to be honest and tell you, I think the plan y'all put in place was the least transparent of any I had seen since we started Trussville City Schools. I know you've had concerns about it, but you've also gone along with it and supported it.
Yeah.
Where are you on that? Do you think it's transparent? And I bring this up, Ben, because we all, the old saying, what's the revolution will be televised? Well, the TCS implosion was literally live streamed. It was live streamed by the Tribune. I think the appointment process contributed to that by building a sense of we don't have to be transparent. We want to point it through transparency. And I give the board all the credit in the world for flipping the script on that from the moment it blew up. But I think the appointment process and lack of transparency did help contribute to the elements that ended up causing the blow up in the school system. Where are you on it? Where do you see it in the future?
So I think everything you just said is a fair assessment. Looking back,
I don't think anybody's ever agreed with it. So thank you.
looking back, I proposed a similar but different version of the current process that we've established. And so I will say I ran on a consistent process, right? I ran on transparency collectively as a whole, okay? And so we'll cover that in a minute, but I ran on a consistent process. And so I will say that we've been consistent with this process that Councilor Bright, as the school liaison, has established. I have been a part of 2 of the interview groups, the
appointment process.
Of the appointment process, of the panel.
Right.
You've been the rotating member.
I've been the
twice.
rotating member twice, okay? I will say both times, whoever ended up in number 2, my number 1 candidate was never selected, okay? I do feel, after now have going through this process twice, we've been consistent, so I stayed true to my word there. I think we have to improve it, and I actually did a letter or a social media post outlining my proposal for this. And so I believe that a panel, you can still have a panel. I believe a different makeup should be utilized for that panel, with outside educators playing a role in this process. So my proposal to whoever is elected as the council, because ultimately this is their decision, but what I would like to see is we modify the process that we have by changing the makeup of the panel, and that panel reviews the resumes, narrows that down to the top 3 or 4 candidates, and then the entire city council, in an open meeting, interviews those candidates publicly. Because I feel it would be very clear who the best person is for that job, and the entire community can kind of see that. And I think that, and it works both ways, so you can see that the person that was selected was the best person for the job or not. So, but we've got to change it. And I've been a fan of accountability and transparency for a long, long time. I ran on it. I think we can make this process better, and we should make this process better.
What about term limits?
I've talked about this, self-imposed term limits as well. I know, I think Scott and I disagree slightly on this. He thinks, if you're in an elected position, the voters are the deciders. But if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, I'm a 2-term and done person, because I believe in term limits. And I think we should have term limits in all of our boards. We have to have fresh ideas, otherwise it becomes stagnant and stale.
Yeah, I am a believer
in
defer to the voter, but we're talking about an appointment.
We're talking about an appointment, yeah. And so I believe in it. My beliefs are in both cases. I don't think the Founding Fathers intended for the system that we have to be what we have. And so that's why self-imposed term limits, even for elected position, is my general thought, hitting the mic, sorry. My general thought process. But in the case of these appointments, we've got to do 2 terms. no more than that. They can rotate off, they can come back, or they can serve in another board in another capacity. So we don't want to discourage people from being involved in the community, right? Because we have some great people, some really talented people, but you've got to have fresh thought, and you've got to have, and we're getting new people in this community every single day. So we don't know what we don't know, and until we're presented with these other people and see them in their body of work. And we can't see their body of work unless we put them in the position to do the work, right? So I'm a big believer, and I would recommend to the council, because again, as the mayor, we make appointments and suggestions, but ultimately the council is responsible. I would say I would never suggest a third reappointment. I would not on a term.
Remind people who serves on that panel now.
So on the school board panel?
Yes.
All right, so right now it is the mayor, the HR director for the city of Trussville. It is the council school liaison, so Councilor Bright, whoever the council president is at the time. And I was not council president the first time. It rotated weird. So a member of the school board typically has been the board president. Yeah. So but it has been historically the president of the board.
Well,
But adding like an educator would.
I would change that.
Nice,
I would change that makeup entirely. I don't believe I think the mayor, the HR director can be there from an advisory capacity, but not a voting capacity to provide that information. I don't believe a sitting school board member should be put in the position where they have to decide if their colleague gets a reappointment or not. I think that puts them in a weird spot, and it also, I think that should be removed entirely. I don't think the school board should have a say. This responsibility falls to the council, and so. And again, some outside educators that the mayor could select or whatever, from other agencies or cities, would be part of the resume review.
That way it doesn't feel like maybe the decision's being made in a vacuum.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
well, and listen, I apologize. I know I have been a hemorrhoid about this for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Before you ever took council, I was.
I can admit when I'm wrong.
And I've said to Buddy that I apologize, but I am adamant about this issue, and I think our schools are so valuable. But even more than that, Ben, what we've seen over the last 4 to 5 years is a huge social upheaval involving our public schools, and I'm talking about all across the country. Okay, and the one thing that has come back to me as I watch all this, and we've got school systems all over America going to different and opposite extremes in different ways, but I have come to understand in that entire process, nobody is as important as the local school board. They are the ones ultimately making the decisions. They have a lot more flexibility than most people realize, and I think for that reason, every citizen of Trussville has every right to know where they stand on major issues before they're appointed, which is why I've been a rear end about this.
Yep.
And I'm sorry for that, but
I know that's fair. I think it should
I'm
be.
too old to change.
It should be public and it should be live streamed.
Yeah.
If you are willing to put yourself and volunteer in that position, you have to realize that you are in the public eye at that point. So you have to be able to handle yourself in that environment.
I think so.
And not be intimidated to answer questions.
Exactly.
In front of everybody.
You've got to be willing to do that.
You do.
Absolutely. Okay. You said you wanted to talk about the Cobra project.
Yeah,
Which really doesn't feel like it's come up.
I had
much
forgotten
yet.
that was
It
an
hasn't.
issue 5 years ago.
It hasn't.
I don't think it was. Well, I didn't make it as big an issue as I did the school board appointment, but that was kind of my opinion.
Yeah, so I think protecting Trussville's history so when you look at the body of work over the past 5 years, the only thing that I have not come through on is the Cahaba project. I've stayed true to my word in every way. The Cahaba project being the one where we haven't hit the mark yet. We have negotiated a deal that's not going to be loved by either side, which is why I think it's probably the best deal and the best chance we have to protect the project. So we have to be respectful of property owners' rights in one way, but we also have to realize that we have to protect Trussville's history as well, and not just Trussville's history.
It's disappearing quickly.
It is, and so I think.
Yeah, it's a part of national history.
Yeah, that's where I was going. Exactly, it
is.
is not just Trussville history. I mean, we're talking about how special the project is, and it goes away day by day.
And Ben, we celebrate that in our state parks.
We do.
It was built at the same time by the same.
We do.
The same administration.
And so I think, and I still support and will support, and I believe we will vote on this. I plan to bring it up prior to this term ending. I don't know if it'll happen before the election or not, but I think planning and zoning will review it, and I think we've got a good shot at getting it out of there. I know your husband was a key and integral role in that, Brandon, and so I have a lot of respect for him and the body of work that he put into that, and it deserves to be voted on. And I'll support it. And again, it's not going to be loved by either side, but I think it's a happy medium that was negotiated by individuals that were on both sides. And so I'm excited to see where that goes, and hopefully we can protect the overall aesthetics of the project moving forward in perpetuity.
Okay. I didn't realize it was going to be voted on.
And
So.
it's important, and I don't
I'm
want to offend you
bringing it
'cause
up,
You're
so.
a property owner in the project area. I live outside of it.
I'm over
But
it these days.
I honestly believe that it is held in unbelievably high regard citywide.
Yeah.
I really think if you polled all the citizens of Trussville, not just residents, it would be pretty one-sided in protecting the historic district.
Yeah, and again, I think with the proposal that will come out and eventually be brought before P&Z, and I'm sure the Tribune will cover it when that gets there, but it doesn't prevent the demolition of homes, but it does provide those design standards building back. And I've talked about design standards being the mechanism of controlling growth. I think we should have design standards everywhere.
Yeah.
If you look at successful cities and ones that I want to emulate, you've got Madison in Mississippi does a great job. Carmel, Indiana continues to be one of the most well thought out city planning cities out there in the country. You've got some spots in North Alabama that have made mistakes and learned from them that we can learn from. So, and the key thing that they go to is design standards. And so we can apply it commercially, and we can also apply it to historic overlay, and I think that's what it deserves.
Interesting.
I appreciate that.
Anything else? Do you have anything else?
And I know that's going to lose me some voters, but that's okay, because it's
Well,
the right thing.
If being honest hurts you, that's just a hurt you need to take.
Yeah.
It does. I don't think I've got
Checked
anything. Can
everything
you
on
think
our
of
list.
anything?
No, we've-
You don't want to talk about transparency and accountability and
Well, that
my
was
craziness for engaging with folks on social media.
Is there anything else you'd like to cover?
No, I just not necessarily cover, but I want people to understand that I'm accessible. I provide my cell phone number. It's 205-566-6936. It's published on the city's website. Don't take things at surface level. If you have a question, I understand emotion on left or right. I get that entirely. But if you want actual data and information, and I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be real with you, I just want you to call and have that conversation. Or join me at one of these community events. I don't know when this is getting released, but I'm going to continue to have those before the election. I want people to be educated and informed about their community and the city that we live in, which is why one of the main reasons I ran in the first place was to give people the knowledge about what was going on, which is why I continue to post planning and zoning, design review, city council meetings and minutes and updates on my social media page. That's why when you ask a question on social media, if it's on my page, I don't engage on what's happening in Trussville to try to avoid open meeting stuff. I don't want to get in that. But on my page, I will answer you and provide, even if you disagree with me, that's okay. I just want you to have the information and be knowledgeable about what is happening in the community and the reason and the logic that goes into the decisions that we make on council. And if I'm fortunate enough to be elected, the decision-making process that I take when making decisions if I'm elected as the next mayor. So,
Ben, we appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, we appreciate
Well, thank
your
y'all.
time
We
very much.
told our audience, and we told all three candidates, there's nothing off the table. We're going to talk as long as we can. We're going to get as deep as we can. And we really wanted you and your two opponents to have the opportunity to lay out your best case for the people and to get into some detail that we can't do, in a hour-long show or a 10-minute interview. So thank you for taking your time. They will see the timer on the video. Our plan is for these to go up either late Tuesday night after qualifying closes or first thing Wednesday morning. That Chris and Brandon will figure that part out. But we want this to go up quickly, and then we will schedule Trussville as early as we can in the forums.
Gotcha.
And reach those, do that as quickly as we can.
well, hopefully I answered all the questions thoroughly and didn't try to just, sidestep them for you. So,
Well, I appreciate it. We're glad you're here. Thank you for coming.
thank y'all.
And that's all we've got, and we hope that this will be useful as you get ready to go to the polls, and most importantly, go to the polls in August and vote for these, really make these important decisions. So anyway, we hope you'll find this useful.